Jelly Tots, how the hell are we? Today I'm going to talk a little bit about unlearning stuff. Unlearning stuff that was not helpful when you learned it and isn't helpful now, or may have been helpful when you learned it but definitely isn't helpful now. There are definitely things that we learned when we were younger that were about, survival mode within the family structure, learning how to be accepted by the people around us, learning what was appropriate in the family we were brought up in or the society we were brought up in. But now we're adults, we can unlearn that shit. It's no longer useful, it's dragging us down, it's making us feel crappy. So certainly there are things that we've learned, behaviours we've learned, beliefs that we've picked up that were useful at one time but really aren't so useful now. So it definitely can swing that way as well. What do you need to unlearn? Why do you need to unlearn it? And what can you do to actively unlearn it? I think those are three questions that could be really useful. They could make really great blog posts. They could make really good segues into exploring this particular topic on a deeper level. So it definitely could be potent to begin with those three questions. Grab your journal or just open up a Word document and start typing and see what comes out. Those three questions have been useful for me so that I can have a look at stuff that I'm still hanging on to, old patterns, old modes of behaviour, old mentalities that I definitely picked up somewhere along the line over the course of my life, but that I do need to unlearn now. You can also put a fourth question in there if you want to, which is, where did you learn this particular thing that you now need to unlearn? Obviously, when we talk about beliefs, behaviours, mindsets that we want to unlearn, we very often also talk in the same breath about how those things were learned during our formative years. And the formative years, there's a little bit of debate about kind of what time span that is, but generally we would see it as the ages from 1 to 7 or 1 to 8. They would be the formative years, or what I like to call the spongy years, because you are kind of spongy during those years. You are so open to your environment, you're learning at a really rapid rate, you are assimilating with the environment outside of the mother's womb, and it's all very new and very interesting, and you are very, very open to it all. You don't yet have a kind of strong sense of who you are, what your values are, what your ethics are, what feels right or wrong for you. So you are, in a sense, led, you are very easily led, you are easily trained, you're easily sculptable, you're pliable, you're malleable. And that's why we talk about a lot of the things that we want to unlearn later, having come from those early years where we were learning how to fit into the family dynamic, how to fit into the society around us, how to bond with our parental templates, that kind of stuff. But I think it's really also important to note and recognise that we don't just pick up things in our formative years that we later wish to kind of part ways with in adulthood. We're constantly picking shit up. Our minds are constantly picking up all kinds of stuff that may or may not be ultimately very helpful to us. The childhood and the adolescence can be key times where the stuff that happens to you, or the lessons that you learn, or the things that were expected of you by people, can go to a very deep place and a very ingrained place, and a place where it's actually kind of difficult to dislodge that stuff. It's so powerful when it goes in, because of the amount of vulnerability we have at certain ages, because of the fact that we rely on our parents or the adults around us in order to survive. And so really we need to assimilate with them, and we need to find a way to survive, sometimes under their tyranny or sometimes in spite of who they are as people, because we have to, because we have no choice, because we won't get fed and clothed and watered and sheltered otherwise. So all of that, is going on. With adolescence, we are really extremely starting to shape our own sense of self for the very first time. So therefore anything that happens in adolescence, or the lessons we pick up in adolescence as well, can have a very lasting impact, because in adolescence we are, as my mother would say, a bit all over the place, or a bit woe and a bit way is another one that she uses. But basically we are realising that we can radically sculpt ourselves the way that we want to be, and quite often, particularly for a certain age group, like a certain age range in our teens, it's whatever our fucking parents aren't, right? Like whatever they aren't, that's what we want to be. And so things that happen in adolescence can be tricky like that as well, where the lessons that we learn, the mindsets that we develop, the traumas that we experience, those things can have a lasting impact, and they can be very ingrained, and they can be the very things that come to affect us and haunt us during our adult life. However, we don't just pick up stuff that becomes a part of our psyche and a part of our nature during childhood and during adolescence. We pick it up all the time. In adult life, we may find that certain mentalities or certain complexes come from a very difficult relationship that we encountered with somebody, or they come from the death of a friend or loved one, or they come from a disappointment with a career and a realization that we want a different career, or they might come from a psychic break, you know, a mental health problem. They can come from all kinds of things. We don't just stop after our late adolescence and suddenly it's like, oh, you know, I'm a fully formed human being, I'm never going to process any new information, I'm never going to go through anything that later might need to be unpicked. No, we are always sewing new parts onto the tapestry of our psyches, and sometimes we do need to go back and we need to unpick some stitches. We need to really say to ourselves, okay, I recognise that this is part of the fabric of my history, and I want to honour and respect it as such, but I don't want it to keep writing the story for me. I don't want it to keep writing the narrative for me. So I need to allow myself to unlearn it. I need to allow myself to honour it, but recognise ultimately that I don't want to live under its tyranny anymore. A lot of the time when we realise that a harmful mindset or a harmful complex has come from something that we picked up in a former time, the response to that can sometimes be resentment or anger at the person that we feel is responsible. This is very, very common with our parents or our parental figures. It is super common in that way. It can also be very common when it comes to difficult relationships, abusive relationships that we may have had during our adult life. Anything that we realise has left a really difficult scar or has left a set of specific behaviours or mindsets that are damaging to us that we really need to let go of. Obviously, the response to recognising that and working on it will often be anger or resentment, and there is a place for that. For example, if you recognise that you are very crappy with money and in a lot of debt, and you tend to have a fear of finances because one of your parents was the same, and one of your parents was like always with the red letters and the bailiff at the door, etc., then you might recognise a sense of resentment and anger towards that parent who was always putting you in the unstable situations with money and was always worried about money. You might realise that you really resent that parent for passing these crappy behaviours onto you, for passing this fear of finances onto you. And there is a place for that. I definitely think that's not the kind of thing you can just bury. I have spoken a few times on the channel about my issues with rage, and I definitely recognise that that came from my father and from his response to anger and the way that he processed his anger. And I certainly went through, as I was trying to kind of figure out my own relationship to anger and why I would get into these rages, I certainly without a doubt went through a lot of resentment and a lot of anger towards my father for the things that I was taught, for the behaviours that I was exposed to, for the mindsets that I was subjected to, and for what I thought it was okay to do when I was growing up. I was definitely falling into a lot of similar modes of being to those I had encountered in my father. And so obviously there was this kind of patch in my personal development with regard to that topic that was tinged with resentment, it was tinged with anger, it was really, I just felt so let down, and I really felt so resentful that I was having to unpick stitches that he himself had obviously found that he was incapable of unpicking, or maybe didn't even think he had to unpick, well clearly didn't think that he had to unpick. So I definitely had some resentment there, and you will experience similar things on your own journey, no doubt. You know, nothing like this exists in a vacuum, nothing like this exists in a void. When you recognise where the seed of your crappy behaviour or hurtful mindset comes from, one of the responses that you have might be anger, and it's important to sit with that. It's important to allow yourself to externalise that in a healthy way. We can explore our anger through making art, we can explore our anger through writing, we can explore our anger through breaking a fucking sweat. That's a great way to do it. You know, hit that punch bag, go to the gym and work out in your living room, go for a run. I love a good angry run. Does anyone else love a good fucking angry run? Because I really do love me some angry running. I like to do a little bit of primal screaming into a pillow. I really love doing that. Just grab a pillow or a cushion, wedge your face right into it, and give it a good horror movie scream. It's just, ugh, when you've just got to get it out, it's just fantastic. You can't stay with anger. You can't live there. You can't live there. You can't drop anchor there. You've got to get it out. You've got to accept it as part of the process, and then you've got to take accountability for your role in refusing to perpetuate a vicious cycle. The anger might roll around again, it might roll around a few times, it's okay, it's not a one time and you're done kind of deal, but the objective is to be done. The objective is to have allowed it to exit so you can continue on with your work. The objective is not to continue on the carousel of resentment and anger, because that's just not going to get you where you want to go, baby. Expressing the anger, the resentment, the sadness that you feel about things that happened in the past, particularly about crappy messages, crappy conditioning that you feel was given to you by your parental figures, that definitely should always lead way to personal accountability. It should lead way to a point in your personal story where you say, you know what, okay, it wasn't perfect, a lot of stuff went down, and it was hard at the time, and it's hard now to accept that I've got this work to do as a result of it, but I'm ready now, I'm ready to show up for myself, I'm ready to be my ally, I'm ready to be my own friend, and I'm ready to kick ass and take names. And it's really got to come to a point where that is your decision. Whenever we go through an experience or a series of experiences, our mind is learning, our mind is picking stuff up, we are learning how to pick our way through this reality. And unfortunately, we go through things sometimes, or we experience consistent conditioning sometimes, which just teaches the mind crappy things that we then need to sit down and we need to unlearn, we need to retrain the brain. For example, if you feel over the years that you've learned that when you exert your boundaries with people, they tend to reject or abandon you, then you are obviously going to struggle to exert your boundaries with people in your life. Even though you really know that you want to and that you feel you should be able to, there is going to be fear inside of you that you're going to be rejected or abandoned. If you had a parent who was very overly critical of you, never really praised or encouraged you, and always told you that you could have done better even though you tried your hardest, then you've learned on some level that you're not good enough. You're not good enough to go after what you want. You're not good enough to make it. So of course it's a process. It's a protest. It is a protest in a way, abstractly, I guess. But no, it's a process. Of course it's a process, and you've got to allow yourself to go through that process. Being your own friend, being your ally on this journey, it's not just about being your friend through the good times. It's not just about talking yourself up and telling yourself that you're wonderful, you're magnificent, you can do it. Of course that stuff is important, of course that's a valid part of it, but being your own friend is also about cutting through your own bullshit. It really is, you know. There's something really life affirming and really invigorating about talking to yourself firmly and being real about what's real, and saying, you know, honey, that is a way in which you have been bullshitting yourself for years, and now no more. You're not allowed to do that anymore. This time you have to take action. This time you have to be accountable. So it's really about recognizing when you are on that BS carousel, as I'm so keen on calling it, and, you know, talking to yourself firmly about making your exit from that BS carousel, jumping right off and moving on into something that is more productive and is more responsible and is going to be juicier for you in life. So of course, being your own friend, being your own ally, it is about self-care activities, it is about self-love, it is about nurturing and feeding your soul through giving yourself inspiration and through stimulating your mind, you know. It is about making sure that you have lovely, positive, functional relationships. It's about making sure that you can keep yourself safe from high levels of toxicity in relationships. It's about all of those things. But don't kid yourself that it's not also about calling yourself on your own bullshit. Because honestly, sometimes that is what it is about. Tough love and self-love are very often synonymous. And I think that's one thing that could stand to be underlined maybe a few more times than we care to underline it. I don't really want to underline it, but sometimes I do have to call myself out on my own crap. I know I sound cynical sometimes when I talk about how self-love isn't a lavender-scented candlelit bath, and it isn't only that. Like, it can be that, and sometimes that is very important, and sometimes that is very fucking revolutionary, to give yourself that, to be Marie Antoinette, to just, you know, not at that point where she was in the guillotine, but that point where she was, you know, drowning in opulence and she was a Habsburg baby. Like, it's important to Marie Antoinette it the fuck up. Like, that is part of the self-love journey, but this other stuff counts too. This stuff where you remind yourself that accountability is key, and that you have to put your big person panties on, you know, to deal with that stuff. You've got to really get into the driver's seat, and it's major adulting. It's the adulting of personal development, is to recognise that you can't blame your parents forever. You can't blame your family forever. You can absolutely recognise 100% that those people had a very harmful effect on you. You can recognise your feelings about those people, you can process your feelings about those people, but don't let them continue to make you stand on the sidelines of your own life. That's what I'm asking you to do. We can look back at some of the crappy things that we've learned in the past, some of the messages that we absorbed in childhood, some of the experiences that taught us to play safe and play the small game. We can look at that stuff and we really can start to use it as an excuse. We can use it as an excuse not to move forward, and I don't want that for you. I did that on my own journey, definitely. I fell into victimhood mode 100%, and I definitely blamed people, principally my mother, for the ways in which I was falling into stasis, for the ways in which I was not allowing myself to move on and play big and fucking bloom and be radiant. It took me a while, I'm not going to lie, it definitely took me a while to stop using some of the difficult experiences I went through, some of the crappy conditioning that I had when I was growing up. It took me a while to stop using those things and just recognise that I had the keys to my own life, and that's kind of what this video is about. Decide why you want to unlearn the crappy things that you've learned and why you want to kind of retrain yourself accordingly. I think it's important to look specifically at what is going wrong when you look at some of the mindsets that you've got, some of the attitudes that you walk into the world with every day, some of the fears and complexes that you have. Take a look at what they actually do to screw things up for you, because that's the why. That's actually the why. When you look at why you want to unlearn certain behaviours, why you want to let certain mindsets go, the why is what they're screwing up for you. It's what's going wrong for you as a result of continuing to harbour those mindsets. The why for me with rage was that I was hurting people. I was hurting people so much. I was scaring people. And the why for me as well was that I really wanted to get back to a sense of spiritual connection that I had when I was younger, before the rage. And I knew that the rage was blocking me off from that, because it was blocking me off from my empathy towards other people. I didn't care that I hurt people or scared people or made them cry. I didn't care that other people felt manipulated by my rages and felt like they had to do what I wanted them to do. All of that was good as far as I was concerned. And suddenly I recognised within myself that that is a lack of empathy. And if you have a lack of empathy, how can you connect to divinity? How can you connect to anything really except your own ego and your own fear? For me, that's how it went down. I just realised that I was really harming people, and I realised that if I was consistently harming people without really caring and without really taking that into myself, then maybe that was why I was struggling to have transpersonal experiences like I used to when I was a child. You know, maybe that was why I was struggling to kind of lift off spiritually in the way that I used to when I was younger. And I made that connection and I did that work. Find your why. Decide why it's important that you unlearn this stuff, and why it's important that you retrain yourself, why it's important that you give yourself other options, show yourself another reality, let go of the things that weigh you down, and accept new belief systems into the fold. I hope this has been helpful, and before I go today I want to alert you to something very special that you can purchase from me now on kellyannemaddox.com. It's called Sounds and Sessions, and it's going to run throughout the whole of the month of September. And basically what it is a collection of very in-depth video and audio resources based around different topics of self-love. Every single one hits a different topic. I'm going to be sending them out to inboxes every Monday and Friday during the month of September, and I'll also be running a secret Facebook group for 6 weeks from mid-August until right the way through September, where we're going to privately discuss the resources that I'm putting out and get into some dialogues about self-love, personal power, self-care, and all that kind of good shizzle. And there is a lot in there this year actually about unlearning and retraining the mind and allowing yourself to have more of the stuff that you need and to let go of the stuff that weighs you down. I have really focused on a sense of personal liberation and a sense of personal permission whilst putting these particular resources together. So if that's stuff that you vibe with and stuff that you need more of in your life, then definitely go over and check out the Sounds and Sessions purchase option if you haven't already. I'll leave it below in the down bar for you. Also, don't forget, I do send a newsletter out every now and then. I send videos, I send unlisted YouTube videos out to my newsletter subscribers. So if you would like to receive videos from me that are exclusive to you as a newsletter subscriber that I do not put out anywhere else, then make sure that you go over onto kellyannemaddox.com and join up. You can find the shizzle, McNizzle that you need on the right hand side in the little sidebar. You can sign up there, put your email address in, and you will not miss any exclusive unlisted video goodies. Much love till next time. Blessed be Pop-Tarts.